Hey, I'm Brandy Susie. I'm a pharmaceutical research scientist. I'm also a certified health coach, and I launched Better Than Fine, or Better Than Fine really is a passion project that I started after my own health journey. I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into that. Basically, where we're going with this is talking specifically about for the people out there who suspect they have a low thyroid problem. So, if you're here, chances are you clicked on this because you suspect you've got something going on with your thyroid. You're in the right place. We're going to talk through this. So, way back, like rolling back the clock to 2016, I started experiencing some pretty significant symptoms that I felt, in my being were related to some kind of thyroid dysfunction. And it took 2 years and lots and lots and lots of doctors telling me that I was crazy and there was nothing wrong with me before one actually ordered the right set of lab work. So, with that, it revealed that I actually have an autoimmune thyroid condition, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. This is where your body is unable to make enough thyroid hormone. It took another 6 years after that diagnosis to actually find a doctor who knew what the hell they were doing to treat me. And in that time, if I can save you that 8-year journey, that is why I am here. That is why I launched Better Than Fine, because it was a rough 6 years between diagnosis and when I started uh, actually receiving the treatment that I needed. And overall, it was a rough 8 years. And there were times, it's almost like knowing the problem is half the battle. And so walking into a doctor's office and having them run some half-assed test and telling you that, hey, you're fine, when it turns out they're actually not even testing the right thing, that's really annoying. And it kind of leaves you with this sense, I know it did for me, of, it felt like I was not being validated. It felt like I was not being heard. Like one doctor even told me, she said, well, because weight gain was one of the symptoms that I was experiencing. I also had a rash on my shin for 2 years. Yeah, I mean, not cool, right? Like, totally not cool. Like the thing itched all the time, and I had it biopsied, and of course the biopsy came back, oh, there's nothing wrong. We don't. I mean, I wasted so much money, I wasted so much time, and yeah, I still remember this one doctor to this day who said, well, you're a woman and you're 35, you should expect this. And I was like, you mean I should expect my metabolism to shut off like a light switch? And she said, yeah. Needless to say, I walked out of that clinic and never saw her again. Um, Now, where I'm going with this is to properly assess thyroid function, you need a panel of test. It's not just TSH. TSH is produced by the pituitary gland. It is not produced by the thyroid gland. TSH is the hormone that stimulates the thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. The thyroid actually produces T3 and T4, but testing total T3, total T4, free T3, and free T4 alone are not enough. Even adding in reverse T3 in there is not enough. We need to also be looking at the thyroid antibodies, particularly anti-TPO and anti-TG. So all of those make a comprehensive set of thyroid tests. And that's just, even that is not enough to sufficiently rule out an autoimmune condition, although it does in about 90% of the cases. So there are cases of seronegative Hashimoto's that can really only be ruled out by doing an ultrasound of the thyroid to look for, to look at lymph node um, morphology and to look at thyroid morphology. So really, like that's necessary in about 5 to 10% of people who have Hashimoto's. Now, um, even when, like, let's say, even if your thyroid panel comes back and is fabulous, does it mean you don't have a thyroid problem? Well, sort of. So, thyroid has a best friend, and it's called cortisol. Cortisol helps to determine how well thyroid hormone gets pulled out of your bloodstream and into your body cells where it's able to be used. This is why if you have a thyroid condition where you are taking bioidentical thyroid hormone, like here I'm talking levothyroxine or a combination T3, T4 therapy or natural desiccated thyroid, like any of those, or just T3 therapy, and you're taking this is why you are told to take your thyroid meds in the morning, is because cortisol is naturally at its highest level of the day in the morning, and cortisol needs to be in this range to help uptake of thyroid hormone from the bloodstream. When cortisol is low, when you are in a state of adrenal fatigue, then what happens is that thyroid hormone actually can't really get out of the bloodstream. And so you can have normal levels of thyroid hormone in your blood work, but still be raging hypothyroid. And that's because that thyroid hormone isn't getting out of the bloodstream and into the cells where it's able to be used. Okay, there are ways to test raging hypothyroidism. One of those tests is a reflex test. This is very common of integrative practitioners in the know, where you have basically a speedometer hooked up to your middle finger, and then they hit this reflex point here in your forearm, and it causes your arm to do, or your hand to do like this, and especially that middle finger to do like this. And that speedometer measures the speed at which that happens. If that is slow, it indicates a likely hypothyroid state in the muscle tissue. Muscle tissue is one of the tissues of the body that actually serves as a reservoir for thyroid hormone. And so this is why like building muscle is one of the best ways that you can boost your metabolism and boost your boost kind of that buffering capacity of the body. And it's especially important as for women as they approach menopause, where, you know, because estrogen also impacts how much thyroid hormone is circulating in the body, because it impacts the amount of a thyroid binding protein known as thyroid binding globulin or thyroxine binding globulin. Even though it's thyroxine binding globulin, it'll bind both T3 and T4. Okay. That's one way. Also looking at your CO2 output, so determining kind of a basal metabolic rate is another way. Basal metabolic rate is variable based on your age, based on your height, weight, like BMI. And it's also very individual. However, there's still a common range for what it is based on your age and your gender and like your BMI. And so for that reason, if you're, you know, if you're lower than it, it points to potentially being in a hypothyroid state. And so this is where, you know, it's so important not to rely so heavily on blood work. Like we have all of these other tools as well to really help dial in and support the thyroid, support cortisol. Of course, if you're in a state of adrenal fatigue, it's really necessary to support healthy cortisol production throughout the day, and there are ways to do that. Adaptogens are not always the answer. I am actually pretty fiercely anti-adaptogen, especially for taking adaptogens in the morning, because adaptogens are not as smart as they're made out to be in marketing claims. They don't actually fix what ails you. Most adaptogens suppress cortisol function, and when you're taking those in the morning, that's problematic a lot of times. Okay, so for next steps, if you want that full list of thyroid lab work that I mentioned earlier in this episode or earlier in this video, if you want, if you're just curious if your symptoms are consistent with low thyroid, hit that link below. It'll take you over to a sign up page for a thyroid quiz. Now, even though it's spelled out as a thyroid quiz, what you get when you sign up there is access to the quiz plus a list of those must-have labs for ruling out thyroid dysfunction. Be sure to follow Feel Better Than Fine. I talk about thyroid health a lot. All right, and thank you so much for being here, so much for being on the page. Until next time, bye.